got synced up and just got used to looking together a little bit. But we're talking about that head of gold, and remember that is, the head of gold is Nebuchadnezzar, and that's the Babylon kingdom, which he is in. And Daniel has just gotten through telling him that he is that head of gold. And that his kingdom, that kingdom, will go, but then at the end it's going to be divided up, and it'll go to a lesser kingdom. And the lesser kingdom is the Medes and the Persians, and when it goes into there, and that's along about the third part. But the interesting part, what we're coming up to now, is we're not going to get into the Medes and Persians just yet. We're going to still talk a little bit more about Nebuchadnezzar and what's fixing to happen to him next. He is going to, with the three Hebrew children, he's fixing to build. He gets to looking at himself, and he gets to thinking, well, I'm great. And so he builds this golden image that he wants to be worshipped. In other words, I would assume probably that golden image would probably look just a whole lot like him if you would have been there to look at it. And he reared that thing up, and he said he wanted to all come and worship it when they heard all kinds of music. He wanted to bring them in there and have them bow down to that golden image. And of course, the three Hebrew children, the three Hebrew boys that was there, they were probably about 23, 24 years old right about this time, 25, somewhere along there. Yes, ma'am.
That golden image was 90 feet high.
Yeah, it was a big thing. He had a lot. He was trying to magnify. You know, he heard the first part. Can you imagine as Daniel told him about that at the end of that, at the end of those years, it would go to a lesser kingdom. And he was there to prove, well, if I'm that head of gold, I can make this thing work. And every time, if you read through Daniel, every time he says, he tells them, he refers to them as your gods. In other words, your gods are the superior gods. But little g, in other words, he don't never give them that full Daniel, your God. He don't your gods. He said he's looking at it still like he's praying to many gods, you see. He believes in many gods, and he thinks they believe in many gods, and they've just got one in particular that shows them these dreams and stuff. And so he is really big on himself right at this point. And so he's made this image of gold, and he said, whoever don't fall down and worship, he's basically going to push everybody into it. If you don't fall down and worship this image that I've created, which is huge and gold, and it's big, magnificent, you couldn't miss it, I'm sure. Probably just think how long it probably took them to put it together. From probably the time Daniel had that first vision to a couple of years anyways of building that thing. I don't know, but I'm sure if you look back on some history, you could probably figure it out. But he built this image of gold, and he wanted to be worshipped. And so he says, whoever don't do that, if you don't fall down and worship this image that I've created, then I'm going to cast you into this furnace. So let's look in chapter 3 here. In verse 7, I try to keep from reading all of it. I don't mind reading all of it. Let's start at 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes and the governors and the captains and the judges and the treasurers, the counselors and the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So he's dedicating this thing basically to himself. And then the princes and the governors, the captains and the judges and the treasurers, they all come together, were gathered together under the dedication of the image of Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. I mean, can you imagine that? He's probably off to the side, and they're standing here looking at it. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, all people, nations, and languages," not just to the princes, but to everybody. And in other words, anybody that was in any kind of earshot of that thing, anybody that could hear when they heard that music, they were to stop what they were doing and fall down and worship that image and give it homage at that point in time. And for the Hebrew young men, you see, they were over all of the princes and the governors. And so for them not to fall down meant that they were, in other words, they were going to go against everything that he said. So it basically not giving him any respect whatsoever is the way he was looking at it. And in verse 9, they spake and said, "King Nebuchadnezzar, King, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, and the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and the dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso fall not down and worship that, he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are the certain Jews, they knew who they were, who thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon." Or you got them set up, and they're not falling down. So Nebuchadnezzar has them brought before him. And they're standing in here. He said, "Look, guys," and he said, "I'm going to give you another opportunity." He said, I'm just going to give you another opportunity. I'm sure he's probably thinking there's probably just some misunderstanding here. He said, "I'm going to give you another opportunity." And I like their answer. They said, "O king," he said, "we're not careful to answer thee in this matter." He said, "We will not fall down." He said, "Whether we die, whether we're cast into the furnace, or whether we die, or whether we live, whether God lets us live or doesn't let us live, we're still not falling down." That made it bad. I mean, he had that thing heated up a lot hotter than what it was. How many times hotter? 7 times. 7 times hotter. So they tie them up and they wrap them up in their hoses and their hose, everything that they have, they kind of bind them up and they cast them into the fire. And when they go to cast them in there, God kills the heat up from the fire, kills those two that cast them in there. So when they open the furnace to cast them in, they just died right there, leaving the furnace open, I'm assuming. Maybe one of the furnaces open, maybe it's just a big open hole. I don't know, but anyways, the king, the way it sounds, he was looking down in, kind of down in there, and he said, "Did we not throw 3 in?" "Yeah, we threw 3 in." He said, "Lo, I see 4, and the 4th is like unto the Son of God." Now he was able to recognize that. And he calls for him to come out. And then I want you to see his answer and what he says. We'll get down to it. See if we can find it here.
Chapter 3,
26, did I get us to
That's where
26?
it starts. That's where it starts. 25 says is where they,
25.
25 is where he says we see 4 instead of 3.
Then Nebuchadnezzar, I just call him on him. But anyways, Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the princes and the governors and captains and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies there was fire, had no power, nor was their hair on their head, changed, nor their smell of fire had passed on them, nor and there was nothing in that, nothing affected them by this furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trust in him, and have charged the king's words, changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. In other words, he's changing. He said, "Why? Nobody's going to do anything." He said, "I want you to serve their God. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, language, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar has another dream after this. And the dream that he has at this time is different than the first dream. And that because he had given this, but what I'm trying to say is he had seen what had happened there. And at that moment and that time, he said, well, I want everybody to worship their God. But he didn't recognize him as his God. That was the problem that he had. Because the next dream he has is God's giving him a warning. It tells him until he realizes that God is who makes kings. And God is who raises the power and puts them down under. And that's the problem with people today, is we don't understand there's a God in heaven that's in control of everything in your life and everything in my life. He is in absolute control. You may think you have this world by the short hairs, but I promise you it can change at the drop of a hat. It can change. And Daniel goes on to tell him after this dream that he has, he said, if you would just lay your sin, basically, he said, lay the sin aside, your heart. He said, and realize that God is the God to serve. He hadn't served him. He's just making everybody else do it. He didn't see the necessity of it. He still hadn't had a change in his own heart. And so that dream that he has is where that tree is coming up. Let's read it. I'm trying to get through it here. And Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders of the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the vision of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. So nothing has changed in his heart. He's still bringing in the soothsayers, the Chaldeans, and he's starting just like he did before. Nothing has really changed in him. Even though he says it, it hasn't changed his heart. And that's where we need to realize as a people, for us, we need to be more than just say it. We need to believe it. He didn't believe it. He brought them in, and as they go to say it, and then who did he go back to? Winds up back at Daniel again, because he knows Daniel's going to have the answer. Daniel will have the answer. And he's fixing to tell him, and he's basically going to tell him that if you don't change your ways, He said, you're gonna go, the kingdom's gonna be taken from you. He didn't think he could, he saw that, he still hung up on that head of gold. That's who he sees himself as. It's this great kingdom. He forgot that God gave it to him. He forgot that God gave him that kingdom, and he's misused it. He's got and his grandsons are fixing to make a grievous mistake. That's how the Medes and the Persians are going to take over here. That's part of that vision that he's seen, and he's already forgotten. He still can't fathom in his own mind how his kingdom can be taken from him. And God gives him a little taste of it, and he says that if you don't listen up, he said it's going to be taken from you, and you're going to eat grass like an ox, and you're going to run till your hair gets like eagle's wings, and then your fingers are going to be like claws. 7 years he's going to do that, and then he said, I'm going to restore you the kingdom. He said the stump's still going to be there, the root is still going to be there, and I'm going to put you back in your kingdom, and he does. He puts it, but he comes back with a changed heart. He comes back knowing that it's God. He said it's God that raises up kings. It's God that builds kingdoms. It's God. He give it to the God of heaven. It is and he worship. He said he basically said, and everybody should worship him. So he come back with a changed heart. And I think that's all God wants from us today is a changed heart. If we change our heart, we're just doing what we think best. But then, after this, Nebuchadnezzar, he has this, and let's go about the little dream. Therefore made I a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, in verse 6, that might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians. Starts the same way. Magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation. So he left the God of heaven out. From the very start, he left him out. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belshazzar, according to the name of my God. In other words, he's probably still calling him Belshazzar. According to the name of my God, and to whom is the spirit of the holy gods. See? Little g. And before him I told the dream, saying. So he's still not changed. Nothing has changed. O Belshazzar, master of the magicians. See? He's still lining him up with all these other people. Master of the magicians. Because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. He didn't just put one God. He said the spirit of the gods. He thinks that he just happens to be the best one, and he's pumping the God of heaven in there with him. Nothing's changed in his heart, and I'm afraid that's where our world is today, because we're seeing in this Nebuchadnezzar the spirit of the Babylonian spirit, which is the spirit of the Antichrist, which is already present in this world, and that gold head that you saw up there all the way down to the feet of clay and iron is where there's only going to be 4 kingdoms to the end of the world. And when you get down there, those other ones are just divided. It's all divided kingdoms. And we're going through the Babylonian, the spirit of the Antichrist is just filling it up, and it's falling. Do you remember what was in Revelation? We were talking about the 7 churches and the 7 church ages. That was talking about the church ages, and this is coming from the Gentile race. In other words, from Babylon to the end of time. The time of the Gentiles. Not the time of the church, but the time of the Gentiles. And the time of the Gentiles goes all the way from that time at Babylon all the way through to the end. And that stone that you saw what come out of the side of the mountain, that's the eternal kingdom that God will set up at the end when he starts everything over. Because that head of gold and that silver and all of that is going to come. It's going to come down. It's going to be made as powder. God's going to do away with it because that spirit of that Antichrist is in all of that and it decays. It's on a steady downfall all the way down through mankind. Then all the way to the end. And so that's where it's leading to. And that's a picture that you see in all of that. And then old Nebuchadnezzar, he finally learns his lesson and he comes out of that state. And it doesn't say too much about him after that. He dies. And then his son takes over. I'm just giving you a little bit of this so when we read it later, we come to it, we'll have it. But when his son takes over, he goes, Belshazzar, I think is his name, and he goes on an expedition, and so he leaves this other grandson in charge, and that's the one that they call him the son, but he's actually a grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. So you've got two of the grandsons, you've got the son of Nebuchadnezzar, and then you've got the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar who's left in charge. And when he's left in charge, he decides he's going to throw a big party. So he's the second in the kingdom. That's the reason when we get to that part. And he offers Daniel when you have the writing on the wall, there'll be a writing. The hand will come out, and he'll offer him the third part of the kingdom. The third ruler of the kingdom. He can't offer it because he's the second, and the first is out. So he can only offer him the one after himself. And I imagine Daniel's what probably held things together in that 7 years whenever he was out running in the fields, when Nebuchadnezzar was out, so he'd come back. There's not a lot said about how long he lived after that point. But they say it's written down. I don't know how you get there. It's probably the way the Persians kept pretty good records. And so there's some records of how long he was in that kingship. But at any rate, whenever that comes down, he brings all the cups and all of the vessels out of they put them into the house of their God. They were stolen out when the tabernacle, when the first not tabernacle, but the first in Jerusalem, there was the one that Solomon built, the temple. When the first temple was destroyed, then they took all that stuff and they took it into the house of their God, but it was deemed as sacred, so they didn't touch it. Well, this guy, he decides he's going to touch it. And so he goes in there. And God knows all this. He knows what's fixing to happen. That's why he said it's going to go to a lesser kingdom. He said a lesser kingdom than yours is fixing to do it. So the Persians get up there, they divert the water coming out of there, and they go up in there. We talked about that last week where it was prophesied by Isaiah in 44 and 45, right, the last part 44 and 45, that they would come in and go under the deal and take the kingdom, and that's exactly what they did. And then Daniel said, you might as well keep that stuff to yourself because it ain't going to do me, this kingdom fixing to fall. And it did that very night. He died. He was killed. So, but backing up to where we're at now, we'll look at a couple of verses here to determine the difference between. Look with me to Luke 21. trying to confuse you, but I want you to see how this succession is coming along. Luke 21. This is Jesus speaking. In 23 and 24. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be a great distress in the land, and wrath upon the people, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now that's what Jesus said, and he predicted, and he was telling them this all was going to happen, and this actually don't happen until about middle ways of that statue. It don't happen during the Medes and the Persians, but it happens during the Romans, in that Roman Empire, and that's whenever the temple gets destroyed, and they're carried away again, scattered basically. They're scattered all over the world. So and this is going to stay that way until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled, and that's not going to be fulfilled. Basically, that's not going to be fulfilled until after the rapture of the church. That's the time of the Gentiles doesn't have anything to do with the church. Look with me to Hosea chapter 3. Hosea prophesies this too. Hosea chapter 3 and verse 4 and 5. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without a teraphim. Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. See, that still hadn't come to pass yet. Because they're still not sacrificing. They're still not doing anything. Why are they not doing that? They don't have a temple. The temple's not there. They've got the temple mount, they've got the temple, the structure, the bottom, the forepart, but they don't have it. What's sitting there now is that mosque is sitting on top of it. Still a sacred spot, but they can't get to it. They can't access it. They can't start back to doing the sacrifice until that temple is built. You see, they're looking at it like this. They still don't see Jesus as Messiah. They don't see him. Well, they don't see Jesus as Savior like we do. Some Jewish do. Because I read to you the other day where they said that there won't be one stone left upon another. Well, I was watching that little program about that, and there was a man sitting there on those stones that's been pushed off the edge of that platform. And they're all down there, all those stones. And he said, what do you think Jesus, when he said there won't be one stone left upon another, do you believe what he said? He said, yeah, I believe it. He said, I'm sitting on the stones. He believed the prophet as him as a prophet, but he didn't believe him as Lord. He didn't believe him as Savior. And so those stones are still pushed off the side. They're still gone. They're still not raising up. Jesus is that temple. That's the reason when he died, the veil was rent from top to bottom. When he was able to have access through the Lord and our Savior. And it's going to be rebuilt. And this is what's prophesied. The time of the Gentile is not up. When the time of the Gentile race is up, then that temple will be rebuilt at that point in time. But that's a whole other part of the story. Don't know that they'll get that far along, but they're going to be deceived. The Antichrist and all that's going to come in, you see, and then he's going to sit in that place, and then we're going to talk about the desolation that Daniel talks about later on. So let's go look at this real quick. Hosea 3, 4, and 5. We done read that yet. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day of the prophet, also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy. I didn't get to the right place. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, so they're without a prince, without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without a cherub. So they don't have any of that right now. They're still waiting. Now look over here to Romans chapter 11. Romans chapter 11, verse 'This is the other part. 25, Romans. So we don't want to become confused with the time of the Gentiles and the fullness of the Gentiles. And here's the difference. 25, verse 25, 11:25, Romans. It says, For I would not, brother, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery. He's going to explain it to you. Lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So, this till this be fulfilled. When does that be fulfilled? When all the saints are raptured out. In other words, one of these days Jesus is going to come back and he's going to take the church out. That will be when the fullness of the Gentiles. In other words, this is our opportunity to be saved in that time. But the time of the Gentiles is that time between Babylon and all the way up. This time here didn't start until Jesus was on the cross. Here. In other words, their blindness, when they crucified Jesus on the cross, their blindness, that's when this time started. That other time started in Babylon. There's two different distinct things going on here. This is about us having an opportunity to be saved. That blindness happened to them, so we have an opportunity to be saved. And then that other one is talking about the fact that the race of the Gentile race of people, and they're going to be that's all about punishment, or it's coming on down. Those that don't get saved out of that will in the end be punished. I mean, there'll be utter destruction along with anybody that doesn't accept it at that time. So, anyway, is that clear as mud tonight? So I got you that far. So you can go back now and double read it and read over it, and then it'll start to make a little bit of sense to you as we come up on these other things as we go. I was trying to give you a bigger shot of it at one time, so when we read some of it, you'll say, I know what's happening there. I know why this is happening. So that's where we're at. So anyway, I hope you get something out of it. I'm just trying to give you something that you can take home with. So when you read Daniel, you got something. You say, I know it means a little more to me right there. And so I can understand it some more. So let's stand tonight and It's good to have, Brother Butch with us tonight. Glad you're feeling a little bit better. Would you dismiss us tonight?
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we are grateful for this time. Lord, we ask you please help us, Lord, as we read it and study the word. Lord, help us to get out of the exactly what it is in our life. Give us clear mind. Pray for understanding as we study. We love you, Lord. We ask you to be with us throughout this next week. Pray, Lord, that the testimony light, Lord, in our community, and a new testimony for those who follow. Lord, we pray for a preacher who's going to protect our children, be with the church. Lord, Lord, we love you. Yes, go with us. Bless you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.